Good afternoon, everyone. It's Cheryl Fisher here, educator at Cedar Run. And today we're going to be discussing lichen, mosses, and fungi. This came up during our live on Tuesday, so I thought maybe a live presentation was better. And the truth is, I actually made a video and messed it up. But figured this is a good one to talk about right here. Because I have many examples, and what we did on Tuesday for our live session was create terrariums. You need two things for terrariums: abiotic and biotic factors. You need living things and you need dead things. So you need decomposition and you need photosynthesis, and you need things to consume the dead things, and you need live things to utilize the air and break down the live things like plants. And not just plants, we're going to talk about the plants, the algae that lives within some of these lichens, and we're going to investigate maybe a couple of our systems that we had here. So normally when we create our closed systems in our terrariums, we wouldn't open it, but as you can see, we have a really interesting closed system. There's a little bit of moisture. You see there's some condensation, and what mosses and lichens need is sunlight, water, and food. And what fungi needs is not sunlight, but they need water and a food source. So there's some similarities, but there are some clear differences. So in here in the bottom of this is from our aquatic system. I actually put a moss in here. So I guess we'll start with moss. And mosses and lichens are similar. They both photosynthesize, but a moss is a simple plant where it's not vascular. And I have two examples. My chickens are running around behind me and the parrots are singing. So I have two examples of two very different kinds of mosses. So this one's a little longer. It does have a little leafy structure. And this is called sphagnum moss. This is down from our wetlands at Cedar Run. And then this is from the uplands. So this one's from our upland terrarium. And this one usually you can find under trees. And you can see it just has some sandy soil, and it gets its nutrients from the leaf litter on the forest floor. So what these mosses have that lichens don't are these little leaves. So you can see it's a little fluffy. And this actually came from a question from a 4-year-old who was asking, what's the difference? And I know a lot of adults that don't know the difference between a moss and a lichen, but these are photosynthetic organisms. You can see that this one's a little fluffy, this one's kind of fluffy too, but they don't have any roots, which makes them really unique, and they need a lot of water. Now, not being vascular, I do have a vascular plant here. It's called tea berry. And what leaves do, vascular just means veined, or just think of the veins in your body, how it gets to the places that it needs to go, or sap in a tree. So without leaves, the sap can't get up into the tree. When it photosynthesizes, it draws water from the ground. A lot of people don't know that too. And then the veins here push it out to the leaves and helps it do that photosynthesis, which creates food for the organism. So here we have lichen, and I talk about it a lot. I know, I'm sorry, I talk about lichen. I just find it fascinating because it's not a plant. It is very similar to mosses, that it reproduces without seeds or flowers. So that's why I meant, it's a very simple plant. Tea berry definitely has flowers and it has seeds. Trees definitely have seeds and flowers. I have lots of flowering plants right now in my yard. And what we have here is a lichen. I have several types of lichen. This one's called reindeer lichen. You can see it's very spongy, and I took it out so it's brittle on the tips, but it is mushy down at the bottom. And what a lichen actually is a symbiotic relationship between fungi and algae. So it gets this green color from the algae or the cyanobacteria that's inside of it. And the fungi protects that cyanobacteria because it has to be wet. It has to stay, it has to have access to water to photosynthesize to get that green color. And what that does is it provides food for this organism. And so they live happily together. They don't access food from the soil like you would think. Isn't that neat? And you can see how brittle this one's going to break off. It's a little bit brittle here, but as long as I give it a little bit of water, it turns spongy again. And it'll continue to reproduce. So I think that's pretty neat. But can you tell them apart? Let's see. Here I have, of course I ran around the yard looking for different things. And I went to the park yesterday. I got some great footage, but I messed up that video I told you about. So right here, is this a moss or a lichen? Can you guys tell me what this one is? It's just on decomposing tree. I didn't take, yep. So yes, this one is a moss. So you can see this is green and leafy, and because it's not vascular, it doesn't get very tall. So the water has to just get to these short leaves, so it leaves it really, really short. Leaves help generate the energy to kind of suck the water up through a straw, but these guys don't have a straw, and so they stay very short and very close to the ground. I think that's pretty neat. Now that one was a moss, and who knows what this one is? Right here. And you can see this is very fragile. If you ever find this type of organism, or even the other type of organism on a branch, a lot of people think that it's killing their plants. It's not. It's just an indicator that something's going on with the plant and it's probably dying. So you see how fragile this is. It was not living, but you can see there's a couple of different types. I know I can't get this to focus, guys. It's focusing on me and the plant behind me. But here, and I'm by myself. So here we have a lichen. So this one's blue, and when it's dry, it's not dead. It's just protecting that cyanobacteria. It's just waiting for extra moisture, and it gets its moisture from rains. Of course, it rains on top of it, or it can just absorb it in this humid atmosphere like my hair. And here we have, sorry, that's my neighbor's dog. And here we have some more lichens, and they can be rusty. I don't know if you can see it here. There's some rusty color, and there's some bluish colors, and then there's some gray colors. I have some excellent shield lichen here that has many, many different colors. It seems to change into the brighter colors when it dries out. I guess those cyanobacteria or those algae tend to condense, and there's blue. I don't know if you guys can see the colors here, but this is very vibrant green, and it does have fibers on the end. I'm not sure if you can see it. I don't know. Trying to get this to focus, guys, but it's not going to on a live video, sorry. But what I want you guys to do is, not yet, I'm going to show you some fungus. And we have lots of fungus this after the 2 days or 3 days of rain that we've had. It was a great day to go seek out fungi, and I highly recommend it. I went to my local park. Of course, I'm always at Cedar Run, but I went to my local park and I found a ton of fungi, but these ones are just from my yard. And what a fungi needs, it does not photosynthesize, even though it has lots of different colors. This one is gilled. They say if they're gilled, don't eat them. I don't eat any of them that I find. I did find 4 chicken of the woods. They're very huge mushrooms that are out in the forest, but the bugs were eating them like crazy, so I didn't harvest it. Those are supposed to taste like chicken, but I don't know. I'm not going to eat them. So this one, there's lots of apps that you can use to identify these things. I use PlantNet to identify plants. This might be identified through PlantNet, but then there's also a lot of mushroom ID apps as well. This one I thought was really interesting. This one, it was white and brown. So this is just a brown piece. No, it's not poo. This is a mushroom that was breaking down a stump in my front yard, and I just thought it was really amazing that it started to look like wood. I guess because of what it was consuming. So it needs food and water and air to reproduce. It does not need sunlight, and it does not need to photosynthesize. I thought that was, so the food is the broken down branch, and of course the air, and water is in the air and during the rains. And let's see, what do we have in here? So just know that I'm going to challenge you guys. What else did I have? Oh, I had a beautiful red, yellow one over here, the red one I just showed you. So this yellow one, it looks like animals were eating it. I'm still not going to eat it. I don't know what it is. If you don't know what it is, you shouldn't eat it. And even if it looks like something that you should eat, you should be very careful with mushrooms. This one is also gilled. Those are these little lines here. And it gets its food, so it's not rooted, but these are fibers. And it gets its food from the decomposing material on the ground. And at the end of summer is the best time. No, we're not at the end of our summer. It almost feels like it. So here on my azalea, I was just looking at my azaleas, and they seem to have a little bit of this green stuff. And this green stuff is lichen. So one thing I like to say is lichen is like it took a liking to, a plant took a liking to a fungus, so they took a lichen to each other. I know that's terrible, but I find them fascinating. You can investigate them on your own. This one is drying out just in this little bit of time. It was in a very wet system, but as soon as it regains moisture and you put it back on the ground, it'll continue to grow. The same thing with mosses. Because they're not rooted, you're not harming them. When you pull it up, you investigate it, you can actually put it right back down and it will continue to grow. So does anybody have any questions? Like I said, I don't always see your questions as they come in on Facebook Live, but I challenge you guys now to teach others that what we used to call all this stuff together, moss, it is not. This is a lichen and this is a moss. So I challenge you guys now to go on a Saturday summer stroll and to look at the trees, look at the ground, just take a little closer look than you normally would, and you're going to start to see there's some really big differences in these species, especially this one. I just love this spongy one called the reindeer lichen. If you have an oak forest, you might find an oak moss, which is not a moss, it's a lichen, which actually looks a lot like this. So we're smarter people nowadays, and I hope that you guys share in the comments below maybe some photos of some lichen or moss that you guys have found on your own time. I'd love to see it, and I'd love for you guys to share your terrariums from Tuesday. If you didn't do it on Tuesday, it's fine, but I'll be observing my terrarium over time and putting my organisms back and closing up the system, probably adding a little bit more water too, just because it's a little warm today. But if you guys have any questions, you can add them below too. I will check often, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday Strolls day. Thanks for joining me.